chapter 13. You ready? Preliminaries are done. I want you to lock in for the word. Can you do that? Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 through verses 22. It says, "Now when Pharaoh had let the people go." Had let the people go. How many are grateful that the devil let you go? Well, he didn't let you go. He had to. The Lord strong-armed him. Let the people go. God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, even though it was nearer, for God said the people might change their minds, and they might see the war and return to Egypt. Hence, God led the people around the way of the wilderness into the Red Sea, that the sons of Israel went up, and it says battle array or military array, some says, or battle formation from the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, and he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones here with you. Then he set out from I can't even pronounce that word. You can read it, and encamped there, and on the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord was going before them with a pillar of cloud by day, and he would lead them the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they may travel by day or by night. And he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night before the people. I'm going to entitle this, or the topic I want to talk about here today, the topic is walking with God. Walking with God. Look to somebody and say, you're in a walk with God. What a great story we find here. And as I was preparing for today and excited to be here, I looking at the story, and God really began to minister to me on this walk, that we're in a walk with God. And, even as I was thinking about walking, I was reminded of, they say that, everyone has that one friend that likes to walk everywhere. Does anybody have that friend? You know that one friend? You guys know that person, right? They always say like it's around the corner, you could just walk. And it's really like a 20-minute walk, a 30-minute walk. Well, my wife helped me understand that I'm that friend. And in Amsterdam, I love to walk. It's part of the culture there, so we walk everywhere. They ride bikes and walk. And so, but it's dangerous to ride bikes there, so I tend to walk more. They say there's more bikes in Holland than anywhere else in the world. And so I do a lot of walking. We do a lot of walking, and now as my family has grown. When we went to Amsterdam, Emily was 5 years old, I believe, gonna be 6. My son was 1 month old, little Douglas the third, we call him. And little Douglas, he was a month old, and then now we had the baby. She's 2. Little Esme, she has a Dutch name. And, so I'm a family man now. We got any family man in the house? I'm a family man. And so, my son likes to be with Pops. He likes to be with me. So he likes to walk with me. And I'm a fast walker by nature. I'm just like, I get in the zone and I just walk. And I have to learn to adjust how I walk now that I'm a family man. Because if I go the way I normally want to walk, I'll end up leaving my son, or I'll end up dragging my son down the street. He has shorter legs than me. And I remember I was walking, and the Lord began to deal with me because my wife, she went on Instagram. She was posting, this is what happens when I walk with Doug. And I was all way ahead of her. I don't know if some of you guys seen it on one of her stories. And then I caught it, and then, she was laughing, and then the Lord dealt with me. And he said, Doug, you're a family man. You need to adjust your speed. And the Lord began to lead me to this passage, because in our walk with God, one of the great lessons that God desires for us, because serving the Lord is a journey, isn't it? We get saved here, and he rescues us, and he transforms us. But then along the journey, there's a journey that we go on. The desire is that we wouldn't stay there, but that ultimately we would move and we would walk with God, and we would eventually end up into the place he has for us, the destiny and the calling he has for us. And God began to minister to me and said, Lord, and began to tell me that one of the lessons the Lord was trying to teach me is that it doesn't matter how fast I walk. The lesson was, am I walking in pace with God? The lesson on the journey is that not that we would just achieve certain things, but the goal would be on this journey that we learn to walk in pace with God. that we learned. This was the lesson that God was beginning to teach Moses here in this passage and here in the story. When you look at his whole story, it was a lesson in Moses learning to follow God, to walk with God, to be in pace and to be in step and to be in tune wherewith God was leading. And we find here in Exodus 13, we find just a glimpse of some valuable principles and lessons that we can learn from. But it didn't start here. It actually started just chapters before in Exodus chapter 3, when God calls Moses from the wilderness, and after being on the run and growing up in the house of Egypt under many different gods and not having a relationship with God, Moses is there and he's in the backside of the desert, and there's a moment that begins to really unfold a series of events that would lead Moses to his ultimate destiny. And it started there in Exodus 3 with the burning bush. A personal moment. God is that personal. God shows up in the midst of a bush. Moses looks to his side. He notices it's not being consumed. It catches his attention. Moses steps forward, and what happens? The Lord begins to speak to him. The Lord tells him, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. And so Moses responds, and Moses responds just like anybody of that time. You understand the ancient Near East and the cultures of that time is that they had many gods. And so gods had names according to what they did and what they performed. So there was the sun god, there was the moon god, there were different gods that they would pray to and worship according to what they needed. And so Moses responds like everyone else of that time. He hears a voice, he recognizes this is God, to him a God. And so Moses responds like everybody, what's your name? And God responds to reveal to Moses, I'm not like those other gods that you worship. They're little g, I'm big G. And he begins to respond to them. And instead of giving Moses a name, he says, I am the I am. In other words, God begins in this personal moment, begins to respond to Moses to tell him, I'm not like everybody else. I'm not tied to just this need or just tied to this need or tied to this situation, but I am the ultimate God I am the creator of the universe. I'm not tied to it. And God steps in and God begins to reveal himself to Moses. And it's in this personal moment that he has with Moses, that Moses begins a journey of walking with God. It takes him on a bunch of events where he ends up back in Egypt and the plagues happen and these series of things begin to happen. And there's so many lessons we can pull from the story of the Exodus and how Moses leads God's people. But we're going to take our moment just to zero in here on chapter 13 and recognize that just like Moses, God desires to take us somewhere. That just like the children of Israel, God didn't just want to pull us out of Egypt, what represents the world and represents bondage, and just take us out just so that we can have good, but that he desires a plan for our life. And along this journey, you and I are going to be in a battle. We're going to face things. We're going to face what we would call the three wills. The devil's will, our will, and God's will. A constant battle that we face. The devil has a will for your life. Don't you know it? It could be defined in 6 different ways. His will is that we would doubt God. His will is that we would live in fear. His will is that we would feel insecure. His will is that you and I would avoid church. His will is that we would be led astray. And his will is that we would fail. It's a battle. The devil desires to place his will on your life. Then we have a will. We have our own set of dreams, desires, goals, and achievements that we would want to have. Even Jesus had it. In the garden, he battles and he says, Lord, nevertheless, not my will. His humanity, just like me and you, he says, Lord, but your will be done. You and I have a will that we're in constant battle with. Do we perceive our own, do we move towards our own will, or do we yield to the ultimate one, which is God's will? Is that we would yield to the perfect plan and the perfect destiny that God has for our life. I want you to know that God has a will for your life. And just like Moses, God desires that on this journey we wouldn't surrender to the devil's will or our will, but we would walk in tune with him so that we can discover his will. So on this journey, we find Moses learning, and we can learn from this small section of Scripture, we can learn some important tips or truths that we can pull from that'll help us if we're going to be in God's will. How many want to be in the Lord's will? Some things that we need to understand about God and about who He is and how He operates. First thing we're going to walk with God, we have to recognize that God gives steps. God gives steps. You know, God desires to direct our life, to lead our life. He desires to lead us step by step, not just event to event or Sunday to Sunday, let me say that. Not just moment for moment, but day to day. God desires to lead us. And when walking with God, we have to recognize that God gives steps. That God desires to lead us day by day. He desires to move us step by step. The challenge is many times is sometimes we look at the big things God wants us to do, and we fail to recognize that the big things only happen by the small steps that we take. The big things that God desires for our life and the big decisions we say are important are built up by the small decisions we make day by day. The steps that He desires to follow. The children of Israel were learning this hand on as they left. They left Egypt, and they're on a journey with God, and you notice how God begins to give them step-by-step directions. He told them not to go the short way, but to go the long way. He led them to the Red Sea instead of leading them through the other way. I've come to find that when you find God's steps, what you're doing is you're finding God's steps towards miracles. I've come to understand that God's leading only leads to greatness. God's steps only lead to provision. God's steps lead to miracles. And what we were seeing here before our eyes in this text is we were seeing as they followed the steps of God, God was going to unfold the many miracles that He would have for their life. I want you to know here today that God desires to lead you day by day. God told them not to go the short way, which in man's eyes seemed normal, wouldn't it? They're on the run from the children of Israel. They're on the run. Egyptians left and wanted to get them. That's why the Lord had to use the pillar of cloud to separate. But yet in the midst of all that, they could have went the short way, which in man's way makes sense. But how many know what makes sense with man doesn't always make sense with God? You know, recently, I think sometime back, they had this thing called girl math. You guys heard of girl math? You guys heard of girl math, huh? Girl math is like when they use a sale to make use of spending more money. You ever heard they say, oh, it's girl math. If I buy 5 Starbucks drinks, I get one free, then it makes sense I'm saving. So buy 5 drinks, I get one for free. That's humanity's understanding, right? But when you follow God's steps, it's not girl math. It doesn't always make sense. It's a God math that doesn't make sense in man's normal arena, and God will lead us to do things that don't make sense in the natural. I mean, for them, I'm sure it seemed like, you know what, let's go the short way. But the key thing about God's steps is God sees the long term. God is not like us that He just sees today and it could predict tomorrow. God is on the outside of time looking at the full scope, and He sees today and tomorrow and eternity all unfolding before its eyes. And so He's seeing not just what happens right now, but what's going to happen next week. And so like the children of Israel, God desires not just to lead us right now, because if they would have followed their steps, they would have ran back to Egypt because they would have found themselves in war and scared. And so when we learn to trust God's steps, we have to recognize that He knows what's going on the other side. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but God does. And so I can trust His steps because it may seem longer, but He must have my best interest at heart. And this speaks to the faith area, to faith, to us, the ability that we must gain, and that is to trust God for His step by step. Not to be willing to just go the short way. I've come to understand that the short way isn't always the best way at times. Taking things into my own hand isn't the best solution for every problem. But an ability what Moses was learning and the children of God were learning here was to learn to trust in God's steps. To learn to trust that God is omniscient, God is all-knowing. He knows what's going on. He knows the heart of man. He knows how we tick. He knows how we move. He knows the full, everything that's happening. And he will desire in his sovereignty, in his full of controlness to lead us day by day to get us where he wants to get us. And we must yield and surrender to God's steps and not be in a rush to make our own moves and to move in our own direction and to move in our own path, but to be willing to follow the steps of God. Secondly, we have to recognize about God, about walking with God, is that not only does God give steps, but secondly, God has a speed. God has a speed. There's a rhythm to God. There's a rhythm to how God moves. There's a rhythm to when God leads his people and how God directs his people. Sometimes the challenge with us, and I'll say myself, to be honest, is we can be very impatient people, can't we? Come on, be honest with yourself. We're all impatient. I was telling the first service, I think one of the most frustrating times of the day is when things are not loading fast enough on our phone. Because we want, like, even internet's not fast enough. You ever trip out on that? Internet's like when I was younger, like we had dial-up. I don't know if you guys remember dial-up. Some of you remember before dial-up. I'm not there yet, but I remember dial-up, some of you still got your MySpace, so I know. But during that time, it was like nothing was ever fast enough. And then you get now, and things are instant. We have high-speed internet, fiber wires, and things, and even that's not fast enough. We're by nature, we're impatient people. We live in a fast-paced society that things are moving fast. It's actually biblical prophecy that the closer we get to the end times, how much knowledge will increase. And that's why even things are upgrading. The 3 months after something is released, it's already outdated. We want the right now. That's why Apple's making a killing every year. You go buy a new phone because you want right away. New technology. And sometimes we can take that into our relationship, into our walk with God, or we want things to happen fast. And nothing is fast enough. But I've learned to recognize God doesn't move according to our time. He doesn't move according to our time clock and to our speed. God has his own speed. And we need to learn something. The lesson is that we will not try to move ahead of God. We will not try to move ahead of God. There's a danger that we get impatient and we try to start moving our own way, and we tend to want to move ahead of God. And the danger of that is that we'll get ahead and make bad moves and bad decisions that God never intended for our life. And we'll find ourselves entangled in things and caught up in different things and stuck in different contracts and different things, all because we didn't walk in pace with God, yet we moved ahead. Children of Israel would have moved ahead of God. They would have found themselves in battle, and God was trying to teach them, listen, I know that seems faster, but can you walk in pace with me? And the other danger is that we would not move ahead of God, but we would get sometimes intimidated or fearful what God is doing, or because of sometimes hurt, and because things don't go our way, we'll move behind. And God is trying to move at a rapid pace, and if we're not careful, we can miss the opportunities that God is holding up because we don't move in God's pace. We tend to slow down. Right now in our ministry, God is moving in a powerful way. We're in a season where God is opening up doors, and you're sensing, I could tell you the doors are opening in countries around the world right now. And in our ministry, we're in a season where God didn't just give us a promise to dispossess nations, but he is opening up the doors for the nations. And I love that our founder, Pastor Sonny, and the eldership throughout the 56 years or plus ministry, they've learned to walk in God's speed. And every season, we've watched our founder move according to God's speed and God's time clock. And when you do that, you see windows of opportunity open up. You see God's favor, and you see opportunities that God begins to do. And the danger is when we get hurt or things don't go our way, and we tend to back off and we slow down. And the danger is God keeps moving. Let me say that again. God keeps moving. God waits for no one. God has his own plan, his own agenda, And for you and I, it's a privilege to be in his will. It's a privilege to be part of his overall arching plan. But God waits for no one. God will continue to move. He will raise somebody up. He will use somebody else. But what God desires is that we wouldn't fall behind and miss it. He gets so far off, we don't even see him no more. He seems so distant, we can't even feel him no more. We don't even see how he's moving because we've gone so far back that he's not even in sight no more. The lesson is that we wouldn't move ahead, we wouldn't fall behind, but that we would walk in rhythm with God. We would walk in rhythm with God. We would walk in God's pace. We would walk in step. God has a rhythm. God has a rhythm that he desires for us to follow. He desires for us to move in. So not only does God give steps, God has a speed, but walking with God, we have to recognize that God reveals signs. God reveals signs. I love it that when God sends us off, that he doesn't just leave us to figure it out on our own, don't you? But God will continually reveal signs. We find it in verse 21 and verse 22, that God continued to reveal this and many more signs to the children of Israel, that as they stayed close with him, that he was with them. Here we find out the first sign he gave them after they left Egypt was the sign that says that the pillar of cloud. The pillar that would appear behind them. It was to separate the armies of Egypt. And so it was a sign that God would tell them that, listen, I've taken you out of Egypt just like he's taken us out of sin. How many remember that still, right? And it was a sign that God was telling them, as you walk with me, remember, if you look, you don't have to look back at your past no more if I've covered it. I think there's some of us, that's a word for you this morning. In the same way, you and I don't have to look to our past because it's been covered. They were covered by a cloud. We've been covered by blood. And in the same way, when we look back, he doesn't see the past. He said, I'm going to put it behind you. I've covered your past. It is no longer there. You don't have to worry about what you've done, your past, your failure. I've covered it. There's a sign that you've been forgiven. You've been set free. You can keep your eyes focused forward. Then God would give them the sign of the fire by night. Oh, I love it because in my short time of serving the Lord, I've recognized that there's sometimes dark hours of serving God. There's moments I found myself in that it felt dark, and I felt like I don't know what's ahead, but I thank God that in the dark hours he provides light for us to lead. And I may not see what's beyond, but I could follow a bright light that God says, I'm still leading you in the darkest hours of your life. Then God gave them another sign. He gave them a sign when they showed up to the banks of the Red Sea. This was a miracle sign here. They showed up, and the armies are coming tailing behind them. It would look like an impossible task ahead of them. God said, don't worry. When you learn to walk with me, I'll give you another sign that I'm with you, and you don't got to worry about who's chasing you because I'm going to split what seems impossible in your life, and I'm going to provide dry ground for you to walk on. Then God wasn't done yet. Then they crossed over, and the children of Israel, like us, started complaining. And God said, don't worry, I got another sign for you. I know you're in the scorching summers of life. He said, but I'm going to provide 12 palm trees, one for each tribe, with a little spring there that even in the midst of the desert, you can find shade and you can find rest. He was giving them a glimpse of paradise on the journey. Then he turned water that was bitter sweet. A message to us that even in the bitterest of moments of life, God could turn something sweet out of it if we focus on him. Then in the midst of the desert, when they're there on their journey and they're hungry, God said, don't worry about it. I'm your provider too. I'll show you that. And he provided quail that would come and land so that they could have meat. And then he said, don't worry about that. I'll add more to that. And he provided manna from heaven that would take care of them for all the years in the desert. And God would give them another sign when he held the sun still when they were in battle to show them that even in battle, I'm your victory. God gives signs. And God would give the children of Israel signs that he was with them as they followed his will for their life. Give them clear signs. The problem is sometimes we can get a little too spiritual and mystical. Because God has a way of confirming his signs. Every sign that we find in the Bible, he gave the children of Israel very definite. Sometimes, we get people, we say, God gives me signs all the time. No, you're just being like super spiritual, I had to tell some people, me and Pastor Ralph were just talking about it. Like, some people, you just got to tell them, like, no, bro, that's just the wind. Because everything's God. Like, the wind blows, ooh, that was God right there. He's leading me to move. No, he's not. That's bad weather. Everything's God. Someone, oh, that's a sign from God. Sometimes, it is. But God doesn't just give us signs. God has a way of confirming his signs. Because he knows that we're emotional. We're fickle. We move by feelings, just by habit and by nature. And so if we just go off our feelings and how we feel with every little sign, all of a sudden we'll end up way off God's course. So God will not only give signs like he did them that were definite. You couldn't deny the signs that were there. God would confirm signs. God has a way of confirming the signs he gives us. The first way God confirms the signs is he confirms through his word. He confirms through the discipline of daily reading his word. That the word of God is alive and active, it says, right? It's alive. It's not just another book. It has been preserved because it's alive. You can't mess up something that's alive. And the perfectness of his word, it's so alive that you and I could read. I know some of the women, they're on their 1-year reading plan. You don't got to just go through it. You can just pick up where you left off. And his word that you read tomorrow will be confirmed. The signs will be confirmed through his word. He will speak from the pages and minister to the depths of your heart. He will give you insight and truth. He will give you revelation from his word that'll speak to us. It'll be fresh manna every day that just says, whoa, okay, God, I recognize what you're doing. He confirms his word. You know the way he confirms? He confirms through messages. God confirms through the preaching of God's word. And we could make it practical. How many of us sat in a service and you felt like someone told the pastor everything you were going through? Some of you are feeling it right now. You're, someone told Pastor Doug exactly what I was going through. No, I haven't talked to nobody, I promise. No, what do we sit in settings? I've been in settings where Pastor Rick's preaching. All of a sudden I feel like there's a spotlight. I'm the only person in the room, and I'm like, how did he know? What is that? That is God, not the man. That's our problem. We look at the man, but it's the voice behind the voice. And God will speak through his man. He will speak through the man of God, through the preaching of his word. He will speak through his vessel, and God will confirm in services. God will confirm through the messages at Bible studies and at third wave nights. And God will speak on Sundays, and he'll speak tonight at prayer. And through the preaching of his word, God will have a way of confirming exactly where you're at. He will single you out and get your attention to confirm what he's doing. Then another way God confirms is God confirms through discipleship. He confirms through his messenger. God confirms the signs of what he wants to do in our life through man. That's the hard one. It's the hard one. Because we live in a society today who doesn't like to surrender to discipleship. We live in this weird, hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but there's this weird, belief. It's like over spirituality where we don't need a pastor, just an online pastor. We don't need leadership in our life. Jesus is my leader. Jesus is my discipler. I don't find that in the text. Only time I find Jesus being a discipler is when he was physically here on earth with his disciples. Then he left and he handed over the task to man. Notice it, Matthew 8:28. He said, "There you go, therefore, and make disciples." He was the ultimate discipler, and then he handed the task over to man that would continually passed on from generation to generation to generation. And God will use leaders in our life, pastors in our life, to speak confirmation, not to run our lives. That's our problem. We get, they're trying to run. No, they're trying to give you biblical advice to get you where you need to be so that you don't go jump in a hole that I climbed out of 10 years ago. You learn from the lessons and the biblical advice. I like to say, for myself, I could speak for myself. My time of serving the Lord, I'm not going to tell you how many years, because then I feel really, really older. I got saved young, though. So my time with serving the Lord has been a series of following my pastor's advice. It's that simple. Stood close to God, and I followed pastor's advice. I followed his advice. When I told him I had Crystal, and he said, okay, wait, you got to wait a year, though. I listened. He said, give yourself to the ministry. And I just listened. I said, okay, now it's time for you to get, you can go ahead, I asked him, is it time yet? It's been a year now. Brother's burning. Not just saying. He said, yeah. He said, it's time. I said, okay, I got a ring, Pastor. What do you think? And why? It's not because he was trying to rule my life. I'm getting counsel. Counsel. Advice. Biblical advice. Yes, I think it'd be great. Then I proposed, and I said, Pastor, I'm thinking about getting married. I proposed in June, a week before her birthday, and I said, Pastor, we're thinking about maybe next April. He said, Sister Jeannie said, what about September? Sister Jeannie moves fast. I was like, oh, Lord. Pastor's like, no, that's too fast. It's too fast. Let's do December. And what did I do? I just followed advice. Looked at it and said, no, it works out. I'll follow my pastor's advice again. And I followed advice. I did things right. Every step of the way, he told me, come with me to Amsterdam. Just trust me. What do you feel? Pastor, that's what I'm feeling. I just got his advice, and I just trusted. And every step of the way, all I've done was trust my pastor. And it's led me from serving in the new gen in that back classroom and giving myself 2 services every Sunday to junior hires who I couldn't get nothing from, and I was just there for them, and I just served there, and I gave myself there, and I followed his advice. I went to Chicago, and I gave myself to Chicago, and for 10 years I followed his advice, and I followed his coaching, and then I followed his advice on a trip to Europe, and then I followed his advice when I went to Europe, and all that has led me to him being able to take me from there to there to there, to release us to the international vision and the calling that God has placed upon our life. And all it has been a series of following the signs and getting the confirmations that God has given through his word, through his messages, through his preacher, and step by step by step, God has led us along the way. Following biblical advice has never led me astray. I'm not perfect. I haven't arrived, but I'm not where I was. God has opened up doors for our life. God will give signs. Some of you, God has given you signs already this Sunday morning. God has been giving you signs. He's been giving you signs. Today, he's been confirming what he wants you to do. I had to learn how to follow the signs. Sometimes the sign led me to opening up my house, to move guys in with me for a discipleship home. The signs led me to the UTC, to give of myself there on the field. The signs led me not to throw in the towel when ministry felt hard and I didn't want to do it no more, but to continue to press through. The signs kept me when my family got farther away and I didn't see the promise, but I just believed it. The signs just kept reminding me. God would remind me in every season, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm working things out, I'm going to turn things around. And sign by sign by sign by sign, God has moved us on. God's desire for us is that you and I, we would walk with God. We would walk with God. We would walk with God. And the reality of it is, the reality of the story is that walking with God is no easy thing. It's a battle. Serving the Lord, it's a battle, isn't it? Don't worry, I'm going somewhere. It's a battle. It's a fight. And like Moses, our lesson in life, Moses' greatest achievement, or it's not his achievement, should I say, one of his greatest attributes that we find throughout his story is his ability to hear God's voice. One of his greatest achievements was the ability to hear the still, small voice. His ability to stay close to God, to walk with God, didn't just affect him, it affected a whole generation and generations to come. His family, his children, what he would be known for far after his death the patriarch of the faith that he became, all hinged on his ability to walk in pace with God. So I gave you points, gave you truths to recognize about what it means and how to, walking in pace with God, things that we need to recognize. But I felt the need this morning, not just to talk about it, maybe to give you a glimpse and show you what it looks like practically. What it looks like practically for us, for you and I, to stay close and to walk with God. It looks like this. Sometimes we get so deep that we miss what it means to really walk with God. How do I stay close to God? That was a prayer. God, how do I stay close? How do I walk with you, God? My prayer, like Moses, he said, Lord, don't send me unless you go with me. Don't let me go unless you move with me, for then how will they know that you're with me unless you walk with me? So how do we walk with God? You know where it starts? It starts in personal time with God. To the mistakes sometimes many believers make, I've made it, if I could be honest. In my early days, I struggled. Wanted God's will. I knew God had a call. I knew God had plans. But I fell in the habit of allowing church to be the replacement for my relationship with God. When church was never meant to replace our intimacy with God, it was meant to enhance our relationship with God. It was meant to take it to the next level, that Sunday is not the only time I spend time with God. It's not my only moment. That the altar wasn't meant to stay here. The altar was meant to live here and for us to take it home with us. And to have an altar at home where our desire would be like, God, I want to walk with you. And where does that walking start? It starts with our daily time with God. It starts with putting everything aside and saying, Lord, before I do anything, before I move about my day, before I do anything, Lord, I want to walk with you. And so I need to stay close. And so there's a time, there's an altar at home. Maybe a bedroom, it may be a part of the couch, it may be a private room you have, your living room, maybe your kitchen, maybe your back patio, maybe a closet you have, wherever it's at. That his desire, if we're going to walk with him, is that you and I would have an altar. We would have a secret place where we come and we don't just open his word on Sunday, but we open it on Monday. We're Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday nights. We would say, I'm not just going to get a word from the preacher, but Lord, your word is alive. You can speak to me Monday. I need you Monday. God, I need you Wednesday. It's been hard. My marriage is struggling. God, I need a word. I need you. I need to walk with you. I'm leading ministry, and the pressure of ministry and leadership is heavy. Lord, I don't just want to walk what I want. God, I want to walk with you. Show me. And it's those moments when we're in his word and we're spending time and we're cultivating our time with him. We're allowing him to speak to us, to lead us, to talk to us. Those times of his word are pushed into moments of our knees when we're praying. We're locked away and we say, this is God's time. And we're spending, this is where the anointing is unlocked. This is where spiritual power is unleashed. This is where you're encouraged. This is where frustration is lifted. Worries, or don't have to wait to bring it to the altar on Sunday. Monday morning, you could come and cast your cares at the altar of your home and the worries of life. And man of God, the pressures of being a father in today's world, that you're able to come before God and say, God, teach me to lead my children. Teach me to lead my wife and my family. Mother who's been feeling the pressure of raising children in this fallen world. You say, give me the wisdom through your word. When the questions arise from my children, take me to your word. Give me something to give them. We're facing all of the pressures of life, and our desire is just to walk with God, but sometimes it seems blurry. Where do we run to? Where does it start? It starts here. We can't afford to wait till next Sunday to Bible study. You got to get it now. And we would find ourselves in that place of prayer and posture of prayer where our prayers would begin to sound like this. Lord, keep me clean. It's simple. Lord, keep me clean. I can't afford to have stain on my life. I can't afford. You're coming back any moment. Any moment. I just did a whole study on eschatology. I spoke on it. The signs are there. The end times, we're there. I don't have the privilege, the right, after what you've done, to allow sin to entangle anywhere in my life, Lord. Purify my heart. Keep me clean. Keep me clean. A heart of repentance every day. A heart of brokenness every day. This is, God, keep me clean. Don't let anything get in my mind. Don't let any hurts trickle in my heart and cause me to get bitter and angry, Lord. Don't allow my view of things to shift. God, keep me clean. The other prayer would be, Lord, keep me close. Lord, keep me close. I don't want to get astray. I don't want to move from you, Lord. I want to be close. I want to hear your voice. Lord, keep me close to your grace. Keep me close to your mercy. Keep me close to the cross. Keep me close to you every day. Walk with me. Talk to me. Lord, keep me close. The prayer would be, Lord, keep me on course. Don't allow me to get distracted. Don't allow me to get caught up in this when that's not what you have for my life. Don't allow me to get entangled with this if that's not what you have. Lord, if it doesn't line up with your plan for my life, get it out of my life. Remove it from my life. Lord, keep me on course. It's in this that everything else hangs on. It's in this, and not religion, relationship. Not task, not duty, but intimacy. This is what makes serving God a joy. This is what unlocks victory in our lives. This is what unlocks favor, provision in our life. It is this that the devil is scared of. It is this that causes him to have to back up. It is this. This right here reminds him of the song I've been listening to, and it has this verse, and it says that he has no more power because the tomb is empty. He doesn't have the crown no more because Jesus beat it on the cross. And this right here is what reminds him that he has to get his hands off you. He has to get his hands off your kids. He has to get his hands off your finances. That he has to move out of the way because you've been tapped into something that's more greater than him, more powerful. I wonder if someone would recognize what is unlocked when you learn this. We get so spiritual. What is it, Galatians or Ephesians? Is who has bewitched you? You started so well, he says, yet you're trying to be made perfect by the flesh. Bewitched. Who's deceived you? The enemy, the deceiver of man, would pull us from this and get us to forget what he's done for us. And our response to what he's done for us is not to live our own life. It's not just to go our own path, our own journey, our own desires, but to walk with him. I want them to sing that verse. We were worshiping, my mind was just, I couldn't help but be grateful and reminded of what he's done, and my response to that is to walk with him.